Welcome back to the British Literature section, where we dive deep into everything you need to know. Today, we are beginning right from the Greco-Roman period, the roots of our literary journey. And here's something important to remember. We've added over 2,000 previous year questions with detailed explanations into this course. Along with that, you'll find the last minute revision section, the revision hub, and of course, all the PDF notes marked with asked in exam tags. Whenever you see that tag, make sure to copy it into your diary. As I always remind you, your diary should be structured exactly like this course, each page corresponding to a chapter. That way, when it's time for revision, everything flows smoothly, chapter by chapter, just like the exam expects. Alright then, let's begin our journey into the Greco-Roman foundations of British literature. When we talk about the roots of European literature, philosophy, and culture, everything begins with ancient Greece. Its literary traditions shaped Rome, and through Rome, they shaped the entire Western world. These traditions didn't just stop with the fall of Greece, they were preserved through the Byzantine Empire and carried forward into the medieval and modern ages. The earliest phase of Greek literature was dominated by epic poetry. At the center stands Homer, traditionally credited with the Iliad and the Odyssey. His epics, set in the Mycenaean world, blended mythology, heroism, and human struggle into narratives that became the cultural glue of Hellenic identity. Alongside him, Hesiod offered something different. In Theogony, he gave a systematic account of the gods, while Works and Days offered moral lessons, reflections on justice, and practical wisdom for agricultural life. Together, Homer and Hesiod built the mythopoetic foundation of Greek imagination. Pause here because exams often divide Greek literature into three key periods. First, the Archaic period, roughly from 800 to 479 BCE, marked by oral traditions of myth, epic, and folklore. This is where Homer and Hesiod belong. Second, the Classical period, from 500 to 323 BCE, the golden age of drama, philosophy, and history. Here we meet Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, who lifted tragedy to profound reflections on fate, gods, and morality. Aristophanes used comedy to satirize politics and social life. And philosophers like Plato and Aristotle turned prose into a medium for exploring truth, logic, and ethics. Finally, the Hellenistic period, from the conquests of Alexander in 323 BCE to 31 BCE, when Greek culture spread across the Mediterranean. This era saw the rise of cynicism, Epicureanism, and Stoicism, asked in exam. These schools of thought reshaped how Greeks and later Romans thought about virtue, pleasure, and endurance, deeply influencing writers like Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. So, when we step back, ancient Greek literature didn't just give us genres like epic, tragedy, comedy, and philosophy. It gave us a vision of human life and the cosmos that has guided European culture for centuries. It set the very standards for storytelling, for reflection, for drama, and for philosophical inquiry. When we look for the true beginning of Western literature, all roads lead back to Homer. Traditionally regarded as the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer is believed to have flourished around the 9th or 8th century BCE, most likely in Ionia, in Western Turkey. But here's the mystery: very little is actually known about his life. Some say he was a blind poet, others argue Homer may not have been a single person at all, but rather a name for the collective tradition of Greek bards. Pause here and note this Milman Parry's 20th century research confirmed the oral formulaic nature of Homer's epics. The repetitive structures, stock phrases, and epithets weren't laziness, they were memory aids for oral performance. And the Greek itself blended Ionic and Aeolic dialects, reflecting that oral origin before being standardized, possibly during the Pisistratian recension in Athens. Now let's turn to the epics themselves. The Iliad, asked in exam, with its 15,693 lines, focuses on the final weeks of the Trojan War. The central tension is the wrath of Achilles, who withdraws from battle after being dishonored by Agamemnon. Only after Hector kills his companion Patroclus does Achilles return, driving the poem toward its tragic climax, Hector's death. Yet, in the final book, Aeschylus is moved when Priam, Hector's father, begs for his son's body. The themes here are wrath, honor, vengeance, and the fragile balance between human will and divine interference. Then comes the Odyssey asked in exam. Another 24 books, but this time it's all about return and survival. Odysseus spends 10 long years trying to get home to Ithaca, while Penelope and Telemachus fend off the insolent suitors who devour their household. Among the most famous episodes is his captivity on the island of Ogygia, where the nymph Calypso holds him prisoner, asked in exam. This epic is about endurance, loyalty, and craftiness, what the Greeks called metis. Odysseus's cunning is the key to his eventual triumph, culminating in bloody retribution against the suitors and the restoration of his home. And don't miss this detail for exams. George Chapman is best remembered for translating Homer into English, asked in exam. His version inspired countless later poets, including Keats, who wrote his sonnet on first looking into Chapman's Homer. So why does Homer matter so much? Because his epics are not just stories of war and journey. They are the foundation of Western literature itself, shaping Greek education, influencing classical tragedy, inspiring Chaucer and Milton, and continuing to define themes of heroism, morality, and human struggle across centuries. Homer remains, quite simply, the poet of beginnings, the one whose voice still echoes whenever we talk about the epic tradition. When we think of the earliest voices of Western literature, Homer usually comes first. But standing right beside him is Hesiod, active between 750 and 650 BC. Unlike Homer's heroic epics of war and aristocratic glory, Hesiod's poetry is practical, austere, and deeply rooted in the life of farmers. He was also the first poet to consciously present himself as a persona within his works, making his voice both personal and authoritative. His most famous work is Theogony, asked in exam, a poem of 1022 lines that offers the earliest systematic account of the gods. He says, beginning with primordial chaos, it narrates the rise of Zeus, who secures divine kingship by overthrowing Cronus and the Titans. The Theogony also introduces Pandora, sent by Zeus as punishment to mankind, symbolizing the beginning of human suffering. More than mythology, this poem established a cosmic order, dramatized through divine struggle. In contrast, Works and Days, asked in exam, is a didactic poem of 828 lines addressed to Hesiod's brother Perseus. Here, Hesiod blends practical advice on farming with moral teaching. Central to the poem is the allegory of the 5 ages of man, the golden, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron ages. Each represents a stage of decline, from an age of ease under the gods to the harsh struggles of Hesiod's own Iron Age. Work for Hesiod is not just survival but a moral duty, and justice Dike is the divine principle that holds society together. Another text linked to him is the Shield of Heracles, though its authorship is disputed. Likely composed in the 6th century BC, it tells of Heracles' exploits and offers a long description of his shield modeled on Homer's account of Achilles' shield in the Iliad. Because of its stylistic differences, most scholars doubt Hesiod wrote it, but the attribution shows how powerful his name was in early Greek tradition. So, what is Hesiod's legacy? If Homer gave the Greeks their heroic ideals, Hesiod gave them myth and morality combined. Theogony explained the divine order, while Works and Days grounded human life in labor, justice, and decline. Together, his works provide a sobering counterpoint to Homer, showing that literature could teach not only glory in war, but also wisdom in daily toil. That is why Hesiod remains one of antiquity's foundational voices and a name you must always keep ready for your exam notes. Publius Vergilius Maro, better known to us as Virgil, was born in 70 BC in northern Italy and rose to become one of Rome's greatest poets. Educated in Cremona, Milan, and Rome, he found patronage under Maecenas, the close advisor to Augustus. This support allowed him to produce 3 masterpieces that trace his growth as a poet: the Eclogues, with their pastoral beauty and political undertones; the Georgics, a profound meditation on farming and human labor; and finally, his crowning achievement, the Aeneid, Rome's national epic. Pause here because the Aeneid is central, and yes, it has been asked in exam. Written between 29 and 19 BC, this epic of 12 books is in dactylic hexameter, asked in exam. Virgil modeled it on Homer. The first 6 books parallel the wanderings of Odysseus in the Odyssey, asked in exam, while the last 6 echo the war scenes of the Iliad. The poem begins with its famous invocation, Arms and the Man. It tells of Aeneas, a Trojan prince, who escapes the ruins of Troy to fulfill his divine destiny; the founding of Lavinium, asked in exam, the seed of what would become Rome. His journey is shaped by storms, divine hostility, and personal trials, most memorably his doomed love for Dido, queen of Carthage, whom he abandons to pursue his fate. In Book 6, Aeneas descends into the underworld where his father, Anchises, reveals Rome's imperial future and the glory of Augustus. The epic ends with Aeneas's merciless slaying of Turnus, a grim but necessary act that affirms the inevitability of fate. Thematically, the Aeneid celebrates Roman pietas, duty, endurance, and obedience to destiny. It projects Augustus's Rome as the culmination of divine design, blending poetic artistry with imperial propaganda. And don't miss this for exams, Virgil's influence reached far beyond Rome. In Dante's Divine Comedy, Virgil himself appears as the poet's guide through the underworld, asked in exam. And in the 17th century, John Milton modeled the 12-book structure of the revised Paradise Lost in 1674 on Virgil's Aeneid, asked in exam. Virgil's poetry became the backbone of Roman education, memorized as both style and moral instruction. Aeneas stood as the model of sacrifice, endurance, and piety, embodying the Roman vision of empire. So, when you recall Virgil, remember him not just as the author of beautiful verse, but as the poet of Rome's destiny, the one who fused lyricism with power and art with empire. After Homer's sweeping epics of heroes and gods, Greek literature took a more intimate turn in the 7th to 5th centuries BCE. This was the age of lyric poetry, a form performed with musical accompaniment for festivals, victories, and personal expression. Unlike epic's grand scale, lyric captured human experience in sharper, smaller, and often more emotional ways. 2 voices shine brightest here, Pindar and Sappho. Let's begin with Pindar, born around 518 BCE. He is celebrated as the greatest of the Greek lyric poets, renowned for his victory odes known as epinepsia. These poems praised athletes who triumphed at the Olympic and other Panhellenic games. But Pindar never stopped at simple praise. He embedded victories within myth and morality, reminding his audience that glory was fleeting, but poetry could preserve it for eternity. Out of his 17-book corpus, 44 choral odes survive, full of dense imagery, sudden transitions, and a lofty tone. His style made sure that human achievement was always set against the backdrop of divine order. Now contrast that grandeur with Sappho of Lesbos, born around 630 BCE. Remember this, Sappho has been asked in exam. Where Pindar celebrated public victories, Sappho gave us the private voice of passion and intimacy. Writing in the Aeolic dialect, she created intensely personal poetry about love, desire, and the beauty of women. Her invention of the Sapphic stanza gave European poetry one of its most enduring metrical forms. Her verses often addressed female companions directly, radiating both tenderness and intensity. While much of her work survives only in fragments, her reputation in antiquity was immense. Plato himself called her the 10th Muse. That title alone shows the reverence with which her lyric gift was held. Together, Pindar and Sappho capture the two poles of Greek lyric. Pindar gave the public ceremonial voice linking human victory with myth and divine favor. Sappho gave the private emotional voice celebrating desire, intimacy, and the beauty of personal connection. Both, in their own ways, show how lyric poetry shaped memory, identity, and even philosophy, teaching Greece to see human experience not just in epic battles but in the delicate victories of love and song.